Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 1.
It was just after midnight when Ryan left his friend's house on the outskirts of town. The drive back home was about an hour, a route that cut through long stretches of farmland and wooded roads with barely any streetlights. He wasn't worried at first. He enjoyed night drives, the silence of the world at rest, the steady hum of the car on an empty road. But halfway into the trip, the easy calm shifted into something else. The first strange thing he noticed was a car behind him. Its headlights appeared out of nowhere in his rearview mirror on a stretch of road he knew was straight for miles. One moment the darkness was empty, and the next those blinding beams were fixed on him. He thought nothing of it at first, just another late-night driver heading somewhere. But the car stayed right behind him, refusing to pass even when the road opened wide. Ryan pressed on the gas, his tires humming louder against the pavement, but the car matched his speed perfectly. He slowed down, and it slowed too. The way it lingered felt deliberate, like whoever was driving wanted him to know he wasn't alone. After 15 minutes of this cat-and-mouse game, Ryan turned down an old back road, hoping to lose the stranger. The car followed. The road narrowed, hemmed in by dark trees, and his cell service disappeared. That's when the real terror began. The car's headlights suddenly cut out, plunging the road behind him into total darkness. Ryan's chest tightened. He stared in the rearview mirror, but there was nothing, just blackness. He thought maybe they had turned around. Maybe he was finally free. But then, without warning, those same headlights flared back on, so close behind him it felt like they were about to ram his bumper. His hands shook as he gripped the wheel tighter. He tried honking, even flashing his hazard lights, but there was no reaction. The other driver just stayed glued to him, unwavering, almost inhumanly precise. Ryan's mind raced. What if they were trying to push him off the road? What if this wasn't random? Every horror story he'd ever heard about people disappearing on lonely highways came flooding back. Then came the worst moment. As the road curved, Ryan caught a glimpse of the driver in the opposing lane when their cars briefly ran side by side. It wasn't the face of someone casually messing with him. The person's head was tilted at an unnatural angle, pressed against the window, and their eyes were wide, locked on Ryan's face with a disturbing, unbroken stare. They didn't blink. They didn't smile. They just stared, their mouth hanging open in what looked like a silent scream. Ryan's heart nearly stopped. He floored it, speeding down the winding road, praying for any sign of civilization. The headlights stayed behind him for another mile before disappearing as suddenly as they appeared. No turnoffs, no place to hide. They were just gone. When Ryan finally made it back into town, he pulled into a gas station and sat in his car, shaking, trying to process what happened. He told himself he imagined the figure's face, that it was a trick of the headlights, his tired mind playing games. But when he looked at the back of his car, there were smears of handprints along his trunk, as if someone had been touching it while he drove. He never took that road again. And to this day, whenever he drives at night, he can't help but check the rearview mirror, dreading the moment when those headlights reappear out of nowhere.
Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 2.
It was just past midnight when Alex started his long drive home from a friend's house. The roads outside the city were pitch black, lined with thick woods on both sides. His headlights cut a narrow beam through the darkness, the only sign of life being the occasional road sign or the reflective eyes of an animal watching from the trees. The drive was supposed to be uneventful, just a quiet stretch of highway before he'd reach his neighborhood. But the silence on that road felt unnatural, heavier than usual, as if something were waiting for him in the shadows. After about 30 minutes, Alex noticed a pair of headlights appear in his rearview mirror. At first, he thought nothing of it, but then he realized the car was tailing him closely, matching his every speed change. If he slowed down, so did the car. If he sped up, it did the same. Unease settled in his chest as the car lingered no more than 2 car lengths behind him, its headlights blinding in his mirror. He gripped the wheel tighter, trying to convince himself it was just a coincidence. Eventually, Alex decided to test the situation. He suddenly turned onto a side road, a narrow, winding stretch of asphalt barely wide enough for two cars. His stomach dropped when the headlights followed. Now his pulse raced. This wasn't coincidence anymore. Whoever was behind him was following on purpose. He thought about calling the police, but the road had no service. His phone displayed a dead signal, and his palms began to sweat. As the road curved through the woods, Alex spotted an old gas station up ahead, its fluorescent lights buzzing weakly. Relieved, he pulled in, thinking the presence of lights and cameras would be enough to scare the follower off. But the car didn't pass by. It pulled in too, parking several spots away. He could barely see the driver inside, just the outline of someone sitting motionless, watching. Alex went inside the gas station, pretending to browse the aisles, but his nerves were shot. The place was eerily empty. Even the cashier looked half asleep, barely glancing at him. He kept stealing glances through the window. The car was still there, headlights now off, but he could feel the driver's eyes on him. After 10 minutes, Alex forced himself to leave, hoping the driver would get bored and move on. He got back in his car and pulled out, his heart hammering. For a brief moment he felt relief. The other car stayed behind, but the moment he hit the main road, the headlights reappeared in his mirror. Whoever it was had waited, deliberately trailing him again. Panic overtook reason, and Alex pushed his car faster down the desolate road, tires screeching around curves. The car behind him matched every move, staying just far enough back to avoid a clear look at the driver. Finally, Alex spotted his turnoff, the small country road that led to his neighborhood. Without hesitation, he swung hard onto it, gravel spraying from his tires. The other car didn't follow this time. Its headlights disappeared into the darkness, vanishing as suddenly as they had appeared. Alex drove the rest of the way home trembling, constantly checking his mirrors, but the road stayed empty. When he pulled into his driveway, he sat in his car for several minutes, chest heaving, trying to convince himself it was over. He finally stepped out, fumbling for his keys, when his blood ran cold. Parked at the far end of his street, partially hidden beneath the shadows of a tree, was the same car. Its headlights were off, but Alex could make out the faint outline of someone sitting inside, watching. He froze on his front porch, too afraid to move, the horrifying realization sinking in. Whoever had been following him didn't lose interest. They knew where he lived now.
Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 3.
It was around 2:30 in the morning when Eric left his friend's house after a late poker game. The drive back home would take him through a stretch of rural highway, an old 2-lane road with no streetlights, barely any traffic, and dense woods that pressed right up against the asphalt. He hated driving there at night, but it was the fastest way home, and at that hour, he just wanted his bed. The road was empty, except for the occasional flicker of an animal's eyes caught in his headlights. The radio signal died miles back, and his phone had no service. He rolled the windows up, locked the doors, and kept his eyes on the yellow lines, trying not to think about how isolating it felt. Then, up ahead in the distance, he saw a set of faint hazard lights blinking on the shoulder. As he got closer, he saw the outline of a car parked just off the road, its trunk slightly open. A man stood beside it, waving his arms. His motions were frantic, almost exaggerated, like he was trying too hard to be noticed. Eric's gut tightened. He slowed down but didn't stop. Something about the scene felt wrong. The man didn't look injured. He didn't look desperate in the way someone genuinely stranded usually did. He just kept staring at Eric's headlights, standing too stiff, smiling a little too wide. Eric's instinct screamed at him to keep driving, and that's exactly what he did. He passed the man, trying not to make eye contact, but in the rearview mirror, he caught something that made his stomach drop. The man immediately stopped waving and sprinted back toward the trees, disappearing into the woods like he'd been waiting for something. Eric pressed the gas harder, his pulse racing. A mile later, just when he started convincing himself he had overreacted, his headlights illuminated another figure standing in the middle of the road. This one was a woman, long hair hanging in her face, barefoot, arms limp at her sides. She wasn't moving, just standing dead center in his lane. Eric slammed the brakes, his tires screeching. His car came to a stop only feet away from her. He laid on the horn, but she didn't flinch, didn't even look up. Something told him not to get out. He reversed, swerved around her, and floored it, heart pounding against his chest. He glanced in the rearview mirror again. For a split second, in the red glow of his taillights, he saw her head slowly lift. Her hair parted just enough for him to see her mouth stretched wide open, not in a scream, but in a grin. And then out of the tree line, several figures emerged, men, women, maybe more, stepping onto the road as if they'd been waiting for him all along. Eric didn't look back again. He drove the rest of the way home at nearly 90, locked every door and window in his house, and sat in silence until the sun came up. The next day, when he finally told a coworker what happened, they just stared at him and said, "That's not the first time people have seen something like that on that road. A couple years back, someone stopped. They never made it home."
Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 4.
It was just past midnight when Eric left his friend's house on the outskirts of town. The road back to his apartment was a stretch of long, empty highway cutting through woods that seemed to swallow the light. His phone was dead, the gas station coffee had worn off, and the only thing keeping him awake was the faint hum of the tires on the asphalt. The night was unusually still. No wind, no crickets, not even the occasional car passing by. He noticed it around the same time his headlights caught something ahead. At first, he thought it was roadkill, but as he slowed down, he realized it was a man standing in the middle of the road. The man didn't move. He just stood there with his back turned, clothes dirty and stiff like they hadn't been washed in months. Eric tapped his horn, expecting him to step aside, but the figure remained perfectly still. Something in his gut told him not to stop, so he swerved around and kept driving. But as his headlights swept across the trees on the right, he saw faces, pale, watching from the tree line, like they'd been waiting. His heart thudded against his ribs as he pushed the gas pedal harder. He told himself he was imagining it, that the lack of sleep was messing with him. But a mile later, he nearly slammed the brakes when he saw the same man standing in the road again. Same posture, same dirty clothes, only this time he was facing Eric's car. His face was wrong. Eyes too wide, skin stretched too thin, lips curled in a grin that didn't belong on a human. Eric didn't think twice. He swerved again and floored it, heart pounding so hard he thought he'd pass out. The rearview mirror showed only darkness, but he could swear he saw movement flickering along the edges of the trees, like shadows running alongside his car. Every time he looked in the mirror, something new appeared. First, a pair of pale hands gripping the backseat headrest, then a face in the reflection that wasn't his own, grinning. He dared not look again. The final stretch of road was supposed to be straight, leading directly to the city lights, but the further he drove, the darker it got. His headlights barely pierced the black. Then, without warning, his car stalled. The engine died, the dashboard went black, and the silence swallowed him whole. He fumbled with the keys, heart hammering, but the ignition wouldn't turn. And then he heard it, knuckles tapping against the driver's side window. Slow, deliberate. He froze, eyes locked forward, not daring to look. The tapping grew louder, closer, until it sounded like it was right against his ear. The car suddenly roared back to life on its own, headlights flickering on. Eric floored it, tearing down the road, and this time he didn't look back. When he finally reached the glow of the city, he pulled over, shaking, and got out to catch his breath. There were handprints all over his car windows. Not one set, but dozens, some large, some small, pressed into the glass from the outside and the inside. Eric never drove that road again. Some nights, though, when he's alone in his apartment, he swears he still hears that slow, deliberate tapping on the glass.
Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 5.
It was just after midnight when Eric left his friend's place and began the long drive home along a stretch of rural highway that cut through endless fields and patches of thick woods. The road was quiet, the kind of silence that made every sound from the engine feel too loud. He rolled down his window to fight off drowsiness, letting in the cool night air. For the first half hour, everything was normal. But then, out of the corner of his eye, he caught something strange. On the shoulder ahead, there was a figure standing alone, illuminated by his headlights. A woman in a pale dress, barefoot, her hair matted as if she had been caught in the rain. Eric slowed instinctively, torn between stopping to help and the creeping unease gnawing at his stomach. Something felt wrong. Her head was tilted at an unnatural angle, her arms hanging stiff at her sides. As he passed her, she didn't move, didn't wave, didn't even look at him. She just stared straight ahead into the darkness. Shaken, Eric pressed harder on the gas. The highway stretched endlessly, and when he glanced into his rearview mirror, the woman was gone. There had been no car for her to come from, no houses for miles. His pulse quickened. 10 minutes later, he saw her again. This time, she wasn't standing on the shoulder. She was on the opposite side of the road, facing his car. Her white dress glowed under the headlights, and though he swerved slightly, her expression never changed. Eric's heart pounded as he passed. He told himself it had to be exhaustion, maybe a trick of the light, but dread seeped deeper with every mile. He gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white and tried turning on the radio to drown out the silence. Static. Every station. No music, no voices, just static. Another 20 minutes went by, and he thought maybe it was over, until he looked at the ditch along the right side of the road. She was there again, running this time, barefoot, keeping pace with his car. Her pale face flickered in and out of the shadows, her hair whipping violently as if caught in wind that wasn't there. Eric slammed on the accelerator, the car jolting as he pushed it past 90. When he glanced again, she was gone. He didn't dare slow down until he finally reached the dim glow of a gas station, an oasis in the void. He pulled in, breathing hard, hands trembling so badly he could barely cut the ignition. The clerk inside looked startled when he stumbled through the door, pale and shaken. Eric asked if there were reports of someone wandering the highway, describing the woman in the dress. The clerk froze, his face draining of color. "You saw her too?" he said quietly. "People around here, they don't stop for her. She's been seen for years. They say if you ever do stop, she won't let you leave again." Eric didn't answer. He didn't even fill up his tank. He just got back into his car and drove away, every nerve on fire. For the rest of the drive, he didn't see her again, but the feeling never left. That at any moment, if he glanced into the rearview mirror, she'd be sitting in the back seat,